Hey everyone, it's Lori Silverman with episode 9 of Level Up with Lori. Today, my guest is Jean Marie Giovanna, and I'm excited to have her. She's the author of Stop Talking, Start Asking. Let me tell you a little bit about this particular show because it's different than others that I've done. We've titled it We've All Been Grounded. It's kind of like we're all in a timeout, right? You know, our parents sent us to the corner of the room and said, you can't leave. Or as I talk about it, as the perfect storm. And we want to talk today about how to successfully shift your reality. So the frame that Jean Marie and I talked about prior to this, as we kind of brainstormed what was going on, is we want to talk a little bit about just the fact that all of us are going through tremendous loss and that we're going through grieving, because I think that's really key to what we're going to talk about today to successfully shifting your reality. And then once we're finished with that and we talk a little bit about meaning, we're going to talk about some questions that Jean Marie has come up with for how do we center and ground. Because once we kind of realize that we're in this next normal, or whatever you would like to call it, we do need to kind of ground ourselves so that whatever happens next, we have an ability to be able to sway like a willow tree would. And then we're going to talk about some questions around what I call the next step and the step after next. So if you would be so kind, please, when you see the notification and join us, introduce yourself. People have been saying to me, well, didn't you know I watched your last show? I was with you. I'm like, no, I didn't see you. I didn't see you because you didn't introduce yourself. So that's the only way I know you're with us. So tell me that you're with me. Tell me that, you know, where you're from and a little bit about what you're doing and how you're faring right now. That would be really lovely. I don't see the notification coming through yet for myself, but hopefully it will soon so that I can see the sorts of folks who have joined us today, but we'll continue on from here. So Jean Marie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's always a blast
And
joining you.
you're in San Diego, right?
I'm currently in San Diego. Yes.
You're currently in San Diego. And what sparked me to ask Jean Marie to come was that she put this up. We are Facebook friends. In fact, she's come to visit me in Las Vegas. So I'm just like so thrilled. She put this list of questions up on Facebook. And I went, oh, we have to do a show. We have to do a show around this. And that's what sparked us. So maybe what you can do is talk a little bit about just for us in terms of when I said, you know, we need to acknowledge that we're grieving first before we can move forward. How does that strike you?
Well, first of all, grieving is not always easy for everybody. But we go through it. It's like we have no choice in a way. So what it really means to me is it's a time to stop and acknowledge what's really going on. How do we really feel?
Yeah, well, and we've all been running up to this point in time, right, at like 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? And then you have a pandemic like this, and not everybody's stopping at the same time, right?
Nope. And that's really important to acknowledge because, you know, some people are out there going, wow, now that you have all this time on your hands, what are you going to do? And it's like, not all of us have all this time on our hands.
Right.
Right.
Well, we have people who are healthcare workers who are out there working. We have delivery drivers. We have people in grocery stores. I know for me, I donate plasma twice a week, and all of those people are there taking care of all of us. I have a few people who are joining us, so this is so cool. Daniel Simon is joining us from Cleveland, Ohio. Hi, Daniel. Robert Vane is joining us from Teesside in the UK. Robert, good to see you. Anna is joining us from London in the UK. Wonderful. Thanks for joining us today. But yes, there are a lot of people who haven't had the opportunity to take a time out, right? But the world is forcing us. I mean, it's forcing us to slow down, right? And I don't know about you, but I certainly, when this all took place, I tell people that in a 24-hour period 2 weeks ago, every single piece of work I had canceled. Talk about like, I didn't even have time to grieve.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's shock. It's shock.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've got kind of this period of where we're going through some readjustments, right? But we also there are some losses because I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way things were.
No, there is no new normal.
No.
no,
No.
no.
Well, that's why think I talk about it as McKinsey does. It's the next normal that we're
Yes.
going to be going through. But one of the things that I found as I was reading a bunch of articles, because I read prolifically every day, was an HBR article. And I talked about this on a webinar I did Monday for Ubiquity University, but I really want to raise it here from a personal perspective and ask the people who've joined us a question, and I'm going to have you actually answer it first. And that is, I found this interview with a man by the name of David Kessler. And David is the world's authority on grieving. And he's had the opportunity to not only work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but he also wrote a book with her called On Grief and Grieving, Finding the Meaning of Grief. And one of the things that he said just stopped me in my tracks. And he said that with the situation we're going through, we can't just accept it, that's not sufficient. We also have to make meaning from it. So the question I'd like to ask you that I would love others to answer, and we have a bunch of other people who've joined us. Lisa's joined us from Italy. Davin has joined us from Australia. And he said, no time out for me. I'm a master's student. Of course not. I got graduate students too. But what meaning are you starting to make from this situation?
It's such a beautiful question. First off, to me, it's a huge wake-up call. Because whenever we have an opportunity, and granted, this is no opportunity that feels good at all, but I always look to what is the bigger question here? What's the bigger purpose? And for me, it's been a wake-up call to really look inside and say, what is important to me? What have I been doing that doesn't serve me anymore? What's truly important, right? Especially when we're all locked down, when we're all sheltered in place, we have no choice sometimes than to actually ask that question.
Well, but what about people who don't want to ask it? I mean, you and I mean,
and you know what? Some of us may not be asking that just yet, right? Especially when we're in careers that are just nonstop. We're just trying to, respond to the situation. So I'm not saying that that's the first question all of us ask, but there's going to be a point where when we slow down, whenever that time is for each of us, we stop to look at what does this mean to us, truly.
Right. And I would love those of you who are listening in to actually answer this question for us too. What meaning are you taking out of this situation right now? Most people don't realize I'm trained as a therapist. And so that takes me really back to when I was in my early 20s. So this question to me is really a profound one. And as you said, it appears to be a wake-up call. And I don't know if just for us as individuals, but I think it's for us as a society as well, right? This is the first time in history that I know of, and you might be more schooled in history than I am, where we're all experiencing the exact same reality.
Yes. And we're not fighting against each other. We're fighting against something outside of us, which brings us together in a whole different way than it's ever had in the past.
That's really, I think that's a very important statement to make, because, and the challenge with that is that we can't hold it in our hand. So I can't beat it. Right. I can't touch it. I can't mold it. I can't reshape it. All I can do is talk about this thing. And there have been lots of really fascinating people who've tried to take this concept, this thing, this illness, and make it reality. But that's part of our challenge, right? So for people who need things to be concrete, it's not concrete right now.
Right. And it's the one thing that's joining us together at this time.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's, I really like David Kessler's work, because what he's saying to us is it's not just enough to accept where we are right now, but we also have to go to this next place of making meaning out of it, making meaning on an individual level, making meaning on a family level, making meaning in terms of our own work and our workplaces or the organizations we're in, or where we've chosen to be in society. And so that'll be interesting to see how that fleshes out over time. I'm not seeing comments, but for those of you who are listening in, if you'd like to also talk about, what does this mean to you right now, please feel free to join in that conversation. But until I get those responses, take me to the next piece. What sorts of questions can we start to ask ourselves to center and ground? Because it's quite challenging. I feel this way frequently because I like to live in the ether. I like to live up here in concepts.
Yeah, it's much easier, isn't it?
Well, you don't always have to attach to reality. I tell people that it's one of the pleasures that you and I have of traveling for work as professional speakers and keynote speakers, and is that we don't have to necessarily ground, right? We're in an airplane. But I think that at times, and especially now, we do need to ground. But before I do that, Davin said, I think in terms of meaning, we all have some purpose at the moment. We can be heroes through our distancing efforts. What an important comment. It shows our care for others and playing our part in minimizing spread. That's a really beautiful statement. And Sejal, thank you for joining us from California.
Yeah, so important. And, it points to something I've learned recently from several clients of mine in corporate is they're seeing innovation in whole new ways because people are collaborating virtually, having really different experiences, even offline, right? Like reading children's books to children of the staff, right? They have like happy hour for, the team members, and yoga in the morning. I mean, these are happening inside corporations.
Right. Well, and what that's doing is that's the way that we're making meaning with each other and co-creating it collectively. So as we're waiting for more of those responses to come in, take me to the questions about centering and grounding. What can really help me to kind of feel like I learned this in Tai Chi, to ground to the center of the earth. And I do that through physical movement. But you, I know, have questions.
Yes, and I do both too. There is a physical movement that is super fast and easy to use, which is imagining you as a tree, because trees are completely grounding, right? And so if you literally imagine that there's roots coming out of your legs down into the earth, way into the earth, and attaching to you and grounding you, that's a physical way. For a lot of us, we need something physical to visualize. And then secondly, with questions, several questions that I ask myself, especially when I'm feeling a little bit distracted or I'm just off, is what do I most need right now? What does my energy need right now? Or what does my heart need right now? Right? See, these are bringing us back to the core. And we often miss that when we're kind of way up in our head a lot.
Would you also add to that, what does my body need right now?
Yes, absolutely. Huge. Actually, that's even more important right now, right? Given our immune systems and the worry and anxiety that's happening within us of, am I going to get this virus, right? That's a human nature response. So what does my body need right now is a beautiful question.
Well, and I was thinking about that because when I go to give plasma, and that's my way of trying to make meaning out of this for myself, it's like, so my career over 40 years ago started in healthcare, and how do I give back from a healthcare perspective? And I figured out that I could get a couple needs met. I could give back to other people, but I'm also very selfish because I live alone. And that, well, I am, because twice a week I get to be physically with other people. And I get to have someone touching, even if it's just my arm with a glove on, right? Or pricking my finger ahead of time, I get to have someone touching me. And that for me is like so huge. But one of the things that they have been reinforcing with us is how we're dehydrated and right now, and that we aren't really eating well. I keep thinking we're going to have like the college freshman 10.
The COVID 10.
The COVID 10. That's it. We're going to coin that term here today. Right, because it's all
Um,
parts of us, right? It's the physical, it's the
yeah,
heart, it's the what and I
yeah,
love your question about energy as well.
yeah. And I will point out, and this, is even in the last few days, my body kind of went through a shutdown because I was trying to respond and help my clients, and through all this, I forgot to listen to my own body,
Ah.
and literally had to take a couple of days just flat out. I was burned out.
Right. So we have some other people responding here. Robert said possibly remote work will become a key business capability, and with this federation of work and accountability will become a key imperative. That's different than what we've been talking about in terms of centering
Mhm,
and grounding, but that's part of the actioning, I think, in the meaning piece. Robert, so
mhm.
thank you for taking us back to what the meaning may be. Dorothy, I don't know how to help you get sound. It looks like other people are getting sound here. So my encouragement is to check your system unless we get some cues from others that they can't hear anything. Sejal is telling us we needed this space and time to breathe and roll this out.
Oh, yeah. In fact, it's good to take a breath right now. It is. Breathing is a huge tool for grounding,
Yeah.
staying
And
present.
yes. And Davin, you're going to have to tell us what you mean by 2-minute noodles. I I might be missing. There might be a relationship there to something that I'm not picking up on right now.
Hmm. Um,
But I want to come back. So it's the physical act of grounding. I learned this in Tai Chi to take my hands, put one over the other, a palm one over the other, put it below my belly button about 2 inches, which is where
mm,
my energy is.
yep.
Stand feet shoulder width apart, and just breathe. Breathe from the core of my belly. And as I breathed in, to see my belly kind of enlarging and getting more light and more energy, which connects your energy piece to it. And then breathing out for that energy then to travel up and to travel down through my legs and
Mm,
to ground me even more so in my body. But I think these questions are also important for people who maybe aren't into physicality,
mhm.
right?
Sure. Yeah. Our questions will align our focus in different ways.
Oh, yes, yes. What Davin said is the food comment was about young university students. The 2-minute noodles. Yes, in the
Oh,
crock pots, right?
oh, right. Yeah. Oh, I remember those days. Or ramen noodles.
I
Yeah.
still know I get ramen noodles
Yeah.
now. That's just not for college students. It's, I think, what you're referring to, which is really, we've got to be careful of here, is that the grounding is not, I move to comfort food. So that's the messaging I'm
Yeah.
going to take from this,
Hmm.
because I think right now it's very easy to lose mindfulness. I live in as you know, a 10-story building. There's 110 units on the Las Vegas Strip. And because we've been told that we really shouldn't leave our premises, people have been walking around the entire outside perimeter of our
Right.
backyard, which it's beautiful. We have a huge space with like 8 tennis courts and a pool and a clubhouse and a hot tub and all these things. So it's a pretty big. I bet you it's an eighth of a mile or not longer.
Mm.
And I'm using US terms here, walk. So if you did 8 of those, you'd have, a pretty hefty exercise workout, at least for the people who are older in my building. Those who are younger might want to round it about 25 times. But I think that's part of it. I mean, talk to me a little bit about, there's another physicality here too, right? Which is movement, because I know that you're a
Yeah.
runner, right?
Well, I jog. Let's just say
Yeah.
I
Okay.
jog. And I only jog on the beach because that's the place I enjoy jogging. I would not call myself a runner, but I appreciate that. Yeah. So the physicality, I mean, there's grounding questions, and then there's questions that take us into action. And especially in these times, right, where we're working from home, often many of us are working in environments that we're not used to, and we're working with people around us, like family members, kids, our parents, that are not typically there. So staying focused and at least on the tasks we have at hand is super important. So a couple of questions that I use is, first of all, when am I most productive during the day? These are important questions for you to
Mhm.
understand, especially now that you're in a different environment. Um, and have I taken time to ground? Have I taken the time to ground? Um, how long do I need to time box things, right? If I'm working on something,
We have lost Jean Marie here. Are you
Oh,
back?
sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
The other one is around time boxing. So
Mhm.
I use that technique a lot when I work because sometimes it's hard to stay focused for periods of time. So pick an hour. What am I going to do in that hour? And then when the hour's up, and you can literally time yourself, is take a break, right?
Well, we've been telling people this though for years. We've been telling them that they
Hmm.
should be. I know, like at Chevron, a colleague of mine who worked there as a contractor a couple of years ago told me that her computer, her laptop, would shut off like at 55 minutes to the hour, and she had to
Hmm.
go take a break. It was meant she couldn't do any more work on it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was either a 5 to 10 minute break. And you're suggesting that we still continue to do that. Other people are offering other things. Um, Robert was talking about qigong. Actually, I did Tai Chi, which is a little bit different than qigong, but that is another um, uh, Eastern martial arts approach that you can use here. Dorothy is saying a morning meditation routine and some brief journaling
Hmm.
has been extremely helpful
Hmm.
for her. I know that you
Yeah.
do that too. That you're a prolific writer as
I
well.
write, I write, and the thing about writing too, and this goes for a lot of things, is where is my energy want to go right now? Like, first of all, I do have questions around creativity too. Like, how can I honor my creativity?
So that's really interesting. Where does my energy want to go right now? Because what if I have to walk into another conference call for work
Hmm. Hmm.
and my energy does not want to go there right now? I mean, what are my choices?
Right. No, I mean, that's reality. And how I would respond to that is okay, you have reality in front of you. You know you have to go into that meeting. So then you can actually say to yourself, okay, so after that meeting, what can I do? Right? To honor my energy. Don't let it go. Because if we keep letting it go, then it's like a battery that just dies over time if we're not recharging it.
Well, and I think what you're suggesting to us, and I want to read a couple of other things as well here after I make this comment, is I mean, this is the uh, maybe the pun in all of this is it's kind of like honor your energy, but maybe we have to take time outs. I mean,
Yeah.
like, right? It's like I almost want to say if I lived with a group of people, here's the deal. At 4:30 this afternoon, we're all going to go to our own corner.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Go
yeah, yeah.
on.
I used to live and work in Sweden in the late 90s as part of my corporate work. And the Swedes at 3 o'clock every day, no matter what, every single day, they have, and I wish I could remember, I'll remember the name of it, but you stop, you have coffee, and you have this Danish. And if you're in your office still working, people literally will knock on your door and say, no, it's time.
Ah,
Right? It's so important to take that time, even if it's 5, it was like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. That's it.
well, and I think that's part of that centering and grounding. Let me read you some other things that people are writing to us here because we're getting some really lovely comments. Renita Ghosh says, finding a way to give back or serving mankind in any form she
Mm,
can. That takes us back to how are we making meaning out of the situation, especially to extend support to those marginalized or underserved communities
mm,
or daily wage workers who are suffering the most at this crucial time with social distancing or self quarantine. That's the focus point of the nations. And she said that bothers her. Um, and
mm.
then Dorothy was talking about how she was using some of the techniques that you talk about to be very productive. Um, and Robert offered to us maybe we need to do the worst first in our prime time.
Mm.
All of
Yeah,
this, right?
yeah, right. Well, yeah. Reminds me of when, growing up, my parents would say, you can't play until you're done with all your work, right?
Yeah,
um,
we
but
got to around the dinner table. We
I,
can't do it till
I
you finish your veggies or something.
I do want to say something that is important, which is as humans, it's important to give ourselves permission, to have that comfort food if we need it in that moment, to, go watch TV for a half hour in the middle of the day. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. We don't have to be on every single moment. And I know many of my clients are in Zoom meetings back to back every hour. Whereas when you're in the office, you at least had time to walk to the meeting, right?
Yes.
So we have to have that downtime at some point.
Well, and maybe it's about, even saying we need to end meetings 5 minutes
Yeah.
early to allow ourselves the
Yeah.
opportunity to take a break. Or if I were leading a meeting and it started at the top of the hour, I think I would do 2 things. One is I'd say to everyone, "Get up, go take 5 minutes, go
Hmm.
do something, come
Yeah.
back, and then we
Yeah.
will start the meeting." And then we'll do our check-in, and that check-in is also to center and ground us
Hmm.
as well. And it's a check-in about just kind of what's going on for you right
Hmm.
now. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you what's going on for you? Anything, did wreak havoc on your life recently, in the
Yeah.
last 24 hours that we need to know about. Daniel offered a website called fffocus.com. It's a 25
Hmm.
minute fine timer. Thank
Oh,
you for
nice.
that. That's
Oh,
really
great.
cool. Um, and then Davin was saying that his creativity has been impacted with a loss of focus and bombardment. Brian Booten, who's joined us from the UK, exercising to Joe Wick's PE session at 9 a.m. every day helps to set my mindset. That would be
Hmm.
another, right?
Hmm.
It's like if you have the physical space. I'm thinking about like when I lived in New York City, I didn't have the physical space to exercise. But if you do, or if you can go outdoors, that would be really lovely to do. And Davin seconded that with exercise. Lisa was saying she has an insight timer, free meditation apps. Um, uh, and then so it's an app evidently called Insight Timer. I'm not familiar with that.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Hmm.
That's a really wonderful suggestion. Um, and then Daniel was saying, he was just reinforcing what you're saying, is a great study technique. Work the 45 to 50 minutes and then take
Yeah.
the break. Um,
There
but
is one thing I'd love to add
yeah, please do.
for running meetings that I like to do as a general practice, and I call it the mind dump because we, especially at this time, is to literally at the beginning of every meeting take 1 or 2 minutes, have everyone take a piece of paper out and just write down everything they're thinking about, worrying about, concerned about.
Mm.
This is for their own. They're not sharing it with anyone. Give them about a minute, write it all down, and then ask each person to put the paper in the back of their notebook or underneath something. And now you can start the meeting because you're more present. So we have stuff in our minds we have to let go of too.
That's fascinating. I used to do that before I went to bed each night, is I would write it all down and
Same
then
concept.
right, same process, and then just
Mhm.
say, "It's going to be safe on my nightstand, and
That's
it will
right.
be there when I wake
Yeah.
up."
And
And
that,
what a brilliant thing to do, and maybe
mhm.
that's what we need to be doing. Again, what are these sorts of, very, very small techniques that we
Mhm.
can incorporate into our own personal lives or into our lives with others? I could even see a family doing this. I
Sure. Yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
be able just to say, as we sit down today to do whatever together, let's get whatever we have onto paper and put it aside so
Yeah.
that we can be present physically with
Yeah.
each other and maybe have to deal with the schedules or whatever else needs to be dealt with going forward. So you've started to move us into this kind of step after next sort of thing, that the sorts of questions. So it's kind of like, I know I need to, and by the way, these are not linear. I don't think they are. I think they're,
Iterative.
yeah, they're not. They're iterative, but they're also in parallel. I mean, I might be grieving for a long time. I might be going through acceptance and what meaning does this have for me? And that meaning may be shifting over time. I'm going to have to center and ground at least once or more a day, at least until the point I
Mm.
get where I'm feeling like I'm getting used to this, because we're in this truly disruptive. It's like being on the white water a river.
Right.
I remember an acupuncture therapist saying this to me one time. She said, "Without a boat, you're on your back, and just make certain you don't hit the shore. Just stay in the center of the river, so you don't go crashing into
Yeah,
a
it is
rock."
not fun.
Right?
I've
It's like,
experienced before flying out of the boat. It is not
no,
fun.
I would
But
not.
yeah, we are feeling that, really,
Right?
all of us.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's these things are being done in parallel. But what are some like next step questions? You started to lead into those with what we can do in
Mhm.
meetings to set aside all these thoughts that are racing through our minds to center and ground and also be present. But what should we start to ask ourselves personally and professionally as
Mhm.
kind of these next steps?
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things is, this time is forcing us to look at what's working and what's not working. And so as we think of next step, one question to ask is, well, what do I want to keep doing?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I need to what do I want to change and start doing that's different than it was before? And especially in companies today, now that everyone is working remotely, and many of these companies said, no, 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 no. Months ago, years ago, no, 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 everyone's got to be in the
Yeah.
office. And now guess what? They're realizing, oh, this can work. So now employees are saying, hey, can we work at home? This is kind of working, right?
Right.
And so it's forcing companies at a grand level to ask the question, well, what do we do here? What's going to work in the future in this next normal, and what has to change? Because this is a time that requires us to change. We're in an age of disruption and we cannot do business as usual. It's impossible.
Yeah, I want to read something from Seth Godin. I think that speaks to this, and then please continue your thoughts because this may spark some others. He was asked the question, "Is everything going to be okay?" And he replied in a blog, "That depends." Right? And if we mean, is everything going to be the way it was and the way I expected it to be, then the answer is no.
Yeah.
The answer to that question is always no, and it's always been no. And I think that's the hard part for people, is that there never was a yes to that. And he said, if we mean, is everything going to be the way it is going to be, then the answer is yes. That's actually kind of spiritual. Of course, if we define whatever happens as okay, then everything will be. And then he says, given that everything is going to be the way it's going to be, we're left with an actually useful and productive question instead. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Like, what's possible from this place?
Well, is it just what's possible? Um, eh, or I think about that on many levels. So maybe it's just my brain working here. At the level of the individual me, I'm probably questioning the future vision I've set out for myself.
Mhm.
What's
Mhm.
possible. If I'm still in school, I mean, I teach graduate students. I might be thinking about, did I even choose the right path? Given that this
Mhm.
wild
Mhm.
card, has come in from the side, and what does that mean to my future going forward? My ability to make work, to get work, and to get a paying income. People like me who've been in business for 30 years are asking the same sorts of questions. So,
Mhm.
so take that a step further for us. What's really embedded in there?
Well, first off, I want to take a step back into what
Okay.
you shared about Seth Godin's quote, because
Yeah.
something that's really powerful about that I think we that I want to point out is kind of goes back to that list of questions that you found on Facebook that I posted, which is be here now. See, moving forward, in order to move forward, it requires us to be present in the now, which is when he says, is everything as it is
Hmm.
now. So, how do we accept what's happening now, learn from it, experiment with it, be creative with it, to then look to see, well, what is even, because when we are constrained, creativity happens, innovation happens. So when I say what's possible from this place, it's like, given all the constraints we have, what can we make of this?
What a beautiful question. That's really beautiful. But something else strikes me in that. So I've used the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI, but I use it for personality temperament, not personality type. So
Hmm.
for people who may not be familiar with it, there are 16 personality types, but there are 4 temperaments, and the 4 temperaments are innate. The thing that strikes me is that we know that about 40% of the population is innately okay with be here now. That's their whole life. That's the way they lead their whole life. I don't care about the past. I don't care about the future. I want to be here now. Those people are probably actually okay because they also are
Mhm.
okay with juggling and things changing. And they actually sometimes like to, and if things were stable, they would like set fire to stuff because they like to see things go up, and see how people react. They're okay. But there's 45% of people, a very large population, that lives in the past. That ability to come to the present moment. And then there are people like me. There's two of the temperaments that are in the future. Now, I know how hard it is for me. I mean, I literally have rituals that I have been going through for years to get me to be here now, right? But those people who are more prone innately to live in the past, that's hard because I'm reflecting backwards. So how do I come to here now?
The best place is to actually explore the now. And what I mean by that is, like, one of the techniques I learned when I took coaching, my coaching training, is what's called process coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Process coaching has you stay in the moment. So it's to explore the now. What does it feel like right now?
Mm-hmm.
What am I experiencing right now? If I had to call it something, what would it be? What does it smell like, taste like, look like, right? And as you get, so you want to go deeper into the now. I know it sounds kind of funny, but like you keep going deeper until you really have it. Like, yeah, this is what it is. And then you can explore, is this what I want? Is it working for me? Right? So, but we have to, that would be the first technique I would say for those who really are more stuck in the past. It's like, okay, well then the only thing you can do is be here, like be with where you are first. Start from that place before we can move forward, because to try and take the jump doesn't make sense.
Well, and it also may be something, and then I'm going to read a few comments that I think go with this, because Robert was saying the key is to be self-aware, right? And that could of spirals of behavior. But I have learned sometimes to go along with what you're saying. It's just to touch the wall, touch the floor.
Exactly.
Feel fabric on clothes. I know this may seem very strange, but this kinesthetic attachment to the now, or standing at a window and looking at what's outside and describing it to yourself, forces you to move to that present moment, and out of that, the innate sense of reflecting backwards, because it is a gift. It's a gift to have that, except for right now, unfortunately, this world that we're in is pushing all of us to be present in the moment. Dorothy was saying that she was in a 2-day conference last week on Zoom. This takes us back a little bit. 10 minutes every hour was a music dance.
Well, I love that, because one of my questions is it time for a dance party? Yeah. Now I live alone. I've worked out of my home office for many, many years, and like you, travel. But is it time? We gotta move the body. Moving the body moves the energy, which moves the thoughts, right?
Yes, and I think that's really key. Would you repeat that again?
Yes, moving the body is moving the energy, which then moves the thoughts.
Absolutely. So it's that physical piece. And I'm going to out one of my students who's listening in, because she sent me a video of her and her husband doing a dance in their kitchen. I absolutely loved it.
See, we need to have a Zoom dance party, and host more Zoom dance parties.
Exactly. Davin was saying that one of the things that could happen, and he's thinking a little bit bigger scale even than we are, is housing is that less pressure for people to move into crowded cities. I mean, that there could be a movement, because we know that the influx has been into the suburban, not the suburban areas, but the downtown city areas of metropolitan areas, kind of like I did here in Las Vegas. But it could be that people decide that they're going to spread out more, global job markets rather than local. Robert was saying, again, this could be the trigger for the disintegration of corporate boundaries, which I absolutely think could happen. This is the longer term kind of implications and fallout. I love these. Davin was also saying the old Phoenix analogy is appropriate right now. Or as someone else said, one crab always manages to escape the bucket.
Yeah.
Run away. Yep. And then Lisa was saying, although you mentioned this is a wild card we're experiencing, foresight strategists and futurists have foreseen a pandemic as a possible future outcome, although we might have overlooked this outcome. What preparation work went into this possibility? And maybe I can just if I can take that for a second, here, because she's in my strategic thinking class right now, and she's talking about some of that. This is the organizational, I think, implication to this, but we can do this on an individual level as well. It's to we sometimes don't put ourselves far enough out into the future. So this is kind of like the step after next she's talking about. And so for me, so the example I've given to my students, I'll use here. About 4 or 5 years ago, I said to myself, and that would have been when I was like 57 years old. I said, what sort of work can I do when I'm age 70? Now, most people aren't asking themselves that.
No.
But I did, because I thought, I'm not going to pull my retirement in the US until I'm 70 years old. So that's like another 13, 14 years. But what will be really valued? And what struck me that would be needed were people who actually taught online and at the university level, because I see a lot of university professors who are tenured, who are much older, and they'll be leaving the workforce. And yet we have people who truly want to learn in a variety of different ways. So I put myself into that future, and I said, be here now. I used I didn't have your words, which I absolutely adore. But if I were to do that now, who would I call? If I were to want to do that now, because that's really the next step, right?
Right.
It's not just have the idea, but I have to say, who can I call? Who can I make contact with? Who could help me through this? Who could help me think this through? And I called like 1 or 2 people, and I said, this is what I want to do. And someone said, oh, there's an opening over here. Why don't you apply? And the next thing you knew, I was teaching years before I ever said I wanted to teach. But that's the ability to live in the future. There are a variety of techniques to do this organizationally, environmental scanning, scenarios, things like that, where we can do that. But to her point, I worked with a client in 2000 where we saw the pandemics coming. Didn't. We all thought it was a wild card.
Right.
We didn't think it was.
We've heard, we've heard this decades ago, right?
Yes.
I want to point to something else that a great tool that I like to use that helps me get into the future is when there's a vision or a dream or a goal I have, is to point to that goal and ask myself, who would I need to be to have that? Who would I need to be to achieve that? And how can I be that now? And by being that now, that goal comes to me faster. But it's being first, then doing.
Well, it's also the positive language, though, if I can give you an example. I remember after I wrote my second book in 1999, I said to myself, I wonder what it takes to be a keynote speaker. And then I just said, I am. Yeah. I am a keynote speaker. I were a keynote speaker. I am one right now. And I'm like, I'm not one. What would I do first?
Yeah.
Right?
You were doing that. That's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. The power of that is huge.
So we're talking about that now for people as well, that this is really, there's an interesting silver lining in all of this, because it's giving us the gift of time. At some level, even with the craziness of, might have 20 people living in our house right now, but it's allowing us the opportunity to reflect. It's forcing us to reflect, I guess I should say, and to say, what do I want to become? We, in the world of storytelling, we talk about creating dream stories, writing down dream stories, not the description of the story, but the actual story 5 to 10 years from now, at yourself as a character and walking through it. Describe a day in your life, right? In the future. And what we know about story ties together many of the things we've talked about up until this point in time. Stories create meaning. So we might see some new and interesting possibilities. When we share that story with others, they might see things that we didn't see, but it's articulating the dream. Because I think that's the other piece that you're talking about, is it can't just sit up here. I heard you say yesterday, earlier, how do you get out of your head? Right? So you have to also viscerally start saying it.
Yeah, and being it physically. Yes.
So what does that mean, to be it physically?
What it means, I'll give you an example. So if one of my goals is to own a vacation home, okay? So let's say that's one of my goals, right? And I ask myself, who would I need to be to own that home? Well, I'd need to be financially in a certain financial situation. But I also would need to be abundant. I would need to have um, a, a mindset of abundance. Like, of course, this is possible. So, how do I have a mindset of abundance and bring abundance to everything that I do? How do I see people as abundant? How do I see my work as abundant? And so I'm bringing that way of being in, and naturally, then I'm attracting that out. I'm not talking about how to get that home. I'm talking about how do I be? What's a way of being I can take on?
Well, and that's and maybe in some ways we're being pushed to um, be that abundant person right now. I would like this. I guess
Mm,
maybe this is my
mm,
idealistic self saying, as people are saying, how can I help? What can I do from my place in the world? That's a place of abundance. And my hope is that we will not go back to a mindset of scarcity, because to your point, in order for us to be in the future, I have to have a mindset that allows me to see that the richness of what is around me.
yes. And going from me to we.
Me to we. I just want to tell you that Lisa's telling us that we're supposed to have a dance show at the end of this show. Maybe you can, Lisa. You're welcome to do that. Both of us standing up right now, Jean Marie and I, might not be a possibility to see us dancing fully, but you are all welcome to do that.
Absolutely.
If I had music, I'd play it right now. I don't have it on with me. And she was also saying is that practicing mindfulness. That's what she would call what you're talking about. How do we practice
Mhm,
mindfulness?
mhm.
And Robert is also taking us into a place that says the workforce will start to diverge from a traditional company-employee relationship. Workers will become more able to work for many companies. So, I mean, what they're talking about, and
Mhm.
I love this with all of you as listeners, you're suggesting to us that this next normal is truly disaggregated, disintegrated. And it's going to be interesting. And maybe you have some views on this, Jean Marie. Like, because my first thought was when I'm reading all these comments is where's the locus of power? The locus of power has been in organizations, right? But I get the
Mhm.
sense, and I would love when people hear this on our LinkedIn Live show right now to comment. But maybe the locus of power in some ways will shift to the worker.
Yes, it's within each of us
Yes.
that creates what we want it to look like. And we have a huge opportunity right now because, as he said, everything is breaking down. The systems, the operating systems, and the systems in which we work are no longer working. They haven't been for a very long time.
Right.
But it's this particular event that is having us wake up and our companies going, ooh, is it, and so I would even challenge each of us to ask how can we bring more of be more powerful in our workplace to have it be the place that we want to be. Or if we want to create a situation where we work for multiple companies, how do we make that work? It's within each of us, and we're being called to really step up.
So maybe my word was wrong as I listened to you. Maybe it's the power of the human. The
Yeah.
power of the human. We talk about, well, how do we empower others? Maybe this period is about empowering ourselves. And I'm just
Yes.
I'm just riffing, and this is real-time riffing, folks. Maybe it's about empowering us as individuals. This takes us back to meaning, saying how are each of us going to do that for ourselves. The abundance piece becomes how do we help others
Yes.
around us to do that in
Mhm.
ways that I think bring us closer to who we are as
Yes.
individuals.
Oh
Um,
my god. Yeah.
Closer
And what
to
brings our uniqueness? Like, there is so much untapped potential in each of us that is not used, and that is not used within our companies because we're playing roles, we're playing we're becoming titles, right? We
Mhm.
have a huge opportunity to tap into that and bring all of ourselves to the workplace, not just pieces of ourselves.
So it's really about a comment I made the other day in a different show, which is we have to abandon this notion of life work balance. It just doesn't work anymore. And that what this next normal is all about is life work integration. And then when we start moving to life work integration, I mean, think about it. When people are home and they're going to be home for a couple months, sad to say, we keep elongating and elongating, but 2 weeks isn't long enough. Now it's a month, but it's going to be 6 weeks. It's going to be 2 months. We've seen this in other countries that are starting to shift to coming outside again and things. It's been a couple months. We're going to really have liked that integration. Some people will not. Some people will divorce. They'll divorce their family. They'll divorce their partner. They'll divorce their friends, and they'll go on to a new way of being. But for others, this will be a tightening of the bonds. And it's not just bonds. I think that what will be different is it's not just familial bonds, it's bonds across lines, because technology, we couldn't have done this 20 years ago. But today, technology allows us to have this commingling anywhere. Look at all the different countries that are represented just here with us today, that people in Australia woke up early. I'm just like so proud of you for joining us, right? And people over in Europe are joining us, and here in the US, right? And so I think that's maybe you can speak a little bit to that too. I mean, there's a lot of interesting questions that go around with this life work integration.
Well, this pandemic makes it universal, right? So we are all in this together. No one's coming out of this. I always say, I'm writing a piece now that no one's coming out of this scot-free, no matter how much toilet paper you have. That's Scott's a toilet paper brand for those of you that may be in other countries that don't have it. But my take on that is, first of all, work-life balance, it's completely personal. It's personal to every individual. Balance looks different from me than it looks like to you and everyone on this call, right? And so what's important is to know, when am I in balance? What does balance mean to me? When am I in balance, and when am I out of balance, and what do I need to do to get back?
Right, and I actually,
it's a process. It's not like, oh, once we're balanced, everything's going to be perfect. No.
Well, I think that what I've learned is perhaps through a set of different experiences, is I gave up the notion of balance. I just said that's part of. Remember, you said earlier, what am I going to toss out? I tossed that out in like 2003, and I just said I'm going to integrate my life together.
Yeah.
And I'd already been working for almost 15 years as a remote, person with my own business. But I just said, I can't achieve it. So why even try? And I realized that for me, work is play and play is work, and everything goes together, and I don't bother to separate it. But that's my choice. That's that's what works for me.
And that's what works for you. Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a couple of comments here. People were talking about housing prices. We might see less pressure upwards. I think that's going to be true all over the world. That we're going to see another perhaps downturn in some of these skyrocketing prices. And then Robert was saying over in the UK, the connectivity of the internet was always going to lead us to a more distributed workforce. Absolutely. Daniel's asking me to play some of my eclectic music mix and hype moment. So these are people who know that, I know, I'm so sad, who know that I go to Coachella Music Festival, and I'm not going, and I love my hip hop and my rap and my EDM music. But what I can tell you, if anyone's interested, send me a note, or I'll put this up with the video. Coachella is doing a 20-year retrospective documentary that's coming out on April 10th instead of the start of the first weekend of Coachella. So we're still going to get some of that interesting music, but you can all ask me about it. Robert was also asking about Isolation by Toto, possibly. We're talking about music, I guess, or Alone by Heart. No, I'm not playing these songs. You all can do it. But they're all laughing with each other as they're looking at their comments here. And then Davin also commented, and he said Sartre's concept of bad faith is pertinent here, especially when people tie up their identity with a job title, and that's going to be catastrophic. So that's what you've also been alluding to as well, I think, is that we're going to have to really, we become the center, not the job become the center. And I think that this will take us, and in fact, this Level Up with Lori show is all about this. It's been sparked because I realized a little over a year ago that I had finally in my early 60s had found my calling, or maybe my calling found me is the way I talk about it. And that I can't see, it's not like I'm not going to do anything else because we all need to make a living. And I'm very aware of that. That's the reality piece you spoke about. But in terms of like, what do I really want to do? I know what I'm meant to do on this planet. And I think that's
Yeah.
the other piece that's going to come out of this too, right? That this reflection time, if we start to tie things together in the last few minutes we have, that this reflection time hopefully will help us as individuals to find our true self.
Yes. And this goes right back to your first question of the meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another part of meaning, which is whatever situation we are faced with right now, each of us are in a very different situation than another, is going to bring up and confront us with whatever we need to heal right now, as tough as it can be. But if we can go there and we can confront the stuff that we've been avoiding and we can move through it, we actually will start to uncover who we really are and what we're meant to do on this planet. And when you are so aligned with that, nothing will stop you.
Well, yes, nothing. You'll have hiccups. So let's
Yeah,
leave it
I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect journey. But when you're clear, that clarity, and we all, I believe we all strive for that. I mean, that's not that we have to, but it creates meaning in our lives.
But doesn't it also do something else? I find that knowing this, I am so grounded.
Yes.
I am so it's like I
Yeah.
didn't have to necessarily work at it as hard because being in this space that I know is where I'm meant to be and the work I'm meant to do and what we're meant to bring forward. You know that for yourself as well.
Mhm.
That if we're off kilter with this disruptions that are happening, it's much easier to center and ground. The
Yeah.
techniques work faster. And I'm always clear about, I ask myself statements relating to this. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me where I need to go. Tell me who I need to talk to. Tell me who to meet. Tell me what to say. Those are all very present moment concepts that take us back again to that front piece that you talked about right after meaning, which is,
Mhm.
how do we do this center and grounding, and what are the
Mhm.
sorts of questions that are necessary? Let me just see if there's any final comments before we wrap up um, for today. Um, uh, Robert said he's heading out to clap hands for the UK NHS heroes. Yes, I read about that,
Mm.
that everyone at a particular time is going out to do that. Um, and I think that's all the new comments I have for right now. I'm very appreciative, Jean Marie, of you sharing your expertise and your wisdom with us. As I said up front, she has written a magnificent book called Stop Talking, Start Asking. I encourage you all to take a look at it. The questions she's shared with us today, I love that you gave us the gift of your heart
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
of
It's
your
been a
wisdom.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Been a pleasure.
yeah, and your wisdom. And that to me is so important. And I think there's just one other comment that was made about we need to reframe being stuck at home to keep others safe. And I think that that's
Yeah.
true, right? That's the abundance. I live in abundance. I'm staying home because it helps the rest of the world to be safe. And when the time is right, we'll all be called. We'll all be called to be outdoors. We'll all be called. I said, I live in Las Vegas. Y'all can come here because we're going to have the biggest party. I mean, I think we're going to have like New Year's Eve,
Right.
probably on July 4th. Don't quote me on that, but that's, that's my
And
vision.
and we'll all be called to our calling.
Yes, we'll all be called to our calling, but I also believe that we will need to, along with this, that this is a very special place and time for all of us. And I think that that's what you've truly illuminated are all these. I want to go back and watch this again because I want to write down all the questions that you've asked us to think about today. Because I think that there is a gift hidden inside of each and every one of them. So thank you. Thank you for
Sure.
sharing
Yeah.
today.
Before you close, can I
Yes.
share one last question that would be
Yeah.
related to gratitude that is so
Yes.
important?
Thank you.
This is one in my book on the chapter of the culture of success. And it's simply one question: how can I make you successful? And if we actually walked around thinking that about everyone we live with, everyone we're working with, the countries we work with, the leaders of our states and areas that we live, how can I make you successful? What can I do today to help you out? It's really powerful at this time.
It is, and thank you, because I think that that's what you've done for all of us today, is that you've shared in order to make us all successful. Thank you. So, to all of you who've chosen to listen in with us today, thank you very much. This was episode 9 of Level Up with Lori, and I'll see you next time.